Well, hello everyone, and here we go again with another lesson or TESOL lesson. Today we'll be talking about creative questions. I'll be sharing a little bit. Now, it's important to remember in these videos that I'm simplifying matters very, very much. If you want to go out, do the research, and start digging and getting into more details and theories and other technicalities, by all means, I encourage you to do that. That will actually help to broaden your understanding. But what I'm doing is very teacher-oriented. It's very practical information. It's not on a lot of theory. What I want to do is share with you what has worked for me over the years and has worked also for the teachers that I have been teaching and training, as well as the students they've been teaching. And so we've had some very good success with these things. And I think if you do the research and boil it down, you're going to come up with a lot of the very similar simplifications that I have presented in these TESOL lessons. So today we're going to be talking about creative questions. The language teacher often is not sure how to progress with a lesson. I'm going to show you just simply or in simple terms how you can turn a short lesson into a useful lesson, how you can turn a quote-unquote storybook or some reading material into an actual lesson that has a warm-up, that has some information given, and then has some practical application. And we'll be doing that by way of quote-unquote creative questions. I say quote because you have to be creative to ask these questions in each situation, but the idea is to create creative questions that will get your learners more apt to participate or more into the lesson, and especially your adult learners or older learners, they want to see a progression, they want to know. And so I've given a short summary to present this in the lesson will be looking at ways to create questions so that we as language teachers can be more interactive and methodical. And again, in my experience with language learners, they want to see the progress. They want to know, or at least feel, that the teacher has some kind of strategy. And so without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and progress. I hope that was intriguing to you, that you want to know more. So let's continue on, and let's look at three types of questions. And the creative question category, there's three different types of these questions. Now, you can get into Bloom. I believe he has 5 or 6 levels of questions. There's no need to go that far. That's more in an educational setting. We're more into language learning, of course. And so we can boil it down to 3 types of questions. The first type is an identification type question. And that's simply used to warm up, to activate schema, to get the student's mind on the information being presented. And so it's more of a very basic level of questioning. The second level is going to be the comprehension level, and this is where you're going to check the student's understanding. You're going to take this chance or opportunity to teach them vocabulary, and you're also going to teach grammar patterns. It doesn't mean that every lesson you will do these, but these are the options available to you. So when you're using the comprehension questions, you can use them to check the student's understanding. You can use them to teach vocabulary. Wow. And you can use them to teach grammar patterns. Then that final level of creative questions in your lessons, you can use what is called the application questions. to achieve relevancy. In other words, what's in it for me, the student. You can help the student develop fluency, in other words, thinking and speaking skills, and building confidence. When you ask application questions, it gives the student a chance to express themselves how they feel or how they think or what they might think about something. And it kind of builds confidence, especially when the teacher completely follows them and understands, and there's not too much or over error correction. And so that's just an overview. Let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Now this is a kind of a basic lesson here, and the title here is Wendy, and you can see some information. Hi, my name is Wendy Lee. I'm 15 years old. I'm from China, and you can read the rest. Now let's say you have a lower level child, language learner. Obviously this looks like a lower level children's lesson simply because of the limited text, the size of the font, and the material or the information presented is more of a lower level children's lesson. So you can identify that immediately just simply looking at the text, looking at the material presented or what the subject is. You can kind of learn fairly quickly what level this is targeting. But that's a different TESOL lesson. But in this case, if we use identification questions, remember the identification questions are used to warm up. So you can approach this different ways as a teacher. There's no one perfect way. You can have the student read the text first. You can have them read one paragraph first. You don't have to have them read a paragraph at all. If you think their level is a little higher, you can simply ask them to look at it or read it quietly, or you can ask questions and they would have to search for it. But I'm not going to tell you what you should do in the approach to the text other than it's what is presented. This is the text. Now, what you can do as a teacher, you can use identification questions to get the student's mind on this material. So for example, you could say, so who is this? Now the answer can be found in the text. Well, obviously this is Wendy. Now the identification questions, the answer should be found within the text. In other words, it's easy. It's kind of a first gear if you're into driving standard cars with standard transmission. So it's first gear. You can also ask, where is she from? Well, the answer is right here in the text. She's from China. So the student could say, from China, she's from China. That would be good. Some students, lower level, will say, I'm from China. And then you can play off of that. You don't have to get up into their face, oh, you're from China. You don't have to do that. But you can simply say, oh, yes. Or you could say, she's from China. And then right there, very subtly, you're not overpowering them with grammar rules. You're very subtly showing them the communicative aspect of your question. Okay? You can also ask, what's in her hand? Now, the answer to this question is not written in the text, but if the student knows what this is, they can simply identify that as a tennis racket. Now, what's interesting is if they don't know what that is, this is a perfect chance to introduce a little vocabulary. And so you would be transitioning from identification into comprehension level. Now, at the comprehension level, let's erase that. The answers must be inferred. In other words, the answer to your questions is not going to be immediately noticeable in the text as far as having the exact perfect, quote-unquote perfect answer. And so, for example, does she have a large family? Now, if the student's level is high enough, they should be able to give you an answer here. Does she have a large family? Well, let's see. She has 3 brothers and no sister, mother and father. It's up to the student to maybe make that call. Well, yes, teacher, she does. No, teacher, she doesn't. Depending on how they perceive that. But the idea is you're asking a question that is designed to get them to think about family size. Not just saying how many brothers does she have. That would be identification. We're asking, does she have a large family, causing the student to have to think about that. Now, another comprehension question you could ask, I'm not saying you must ask all of these, and you're actually going to vary these according to the student's level. If the student's level is low, you'll probably want to spend more time with the identification questions and build up their confidence. If their level's a little higher, you can do 1 or 2 just to kind of activate schema, get their mind on the material, and spend a little more time in comprehension and eventually in application. So it's very adjustable, these creative questions. But the idea is you're starting small or light, and you're working your way up to a final goal, which is the students to be able to communicate and express their thoughts of their own lives, the relativity to them, the relevance, I should say. Okay? And in the end, the student's going to feel, wow, I had a lesson. So this is pretty cool. Now next, where did she live before England? Now the student has to think about that question. Where did she live before England? Now maybe the student says, England. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for you to explain or show the student the difference between does and did, before and now. So you're introducing grammar, but in a communicative context. You're not teaching a grammar lesson. You're responding reflexively or reflectively to how the students respond to you. Now, this is good for one-on-one or group classes. So you can use this creative question methodology to help you through some difficult material, really. But in this case, where did she live before England? Hopefully the student or students could say, she lived in or she is from China. So here you're checking the comprehension. Obviously they can understand. Now you can go a little more. If they can't answer the questions, obviously language learner level is a little lower than what you might hope for or expect. So you make adjustments, not only in questions, but also perhaps your speech, make adjustments in vocabulary so that you can meet the learner where they are. That's the idea, right? It's not that they have to come up to us, it's that we need to come down to them a little higher, slightly higher, remember I+1, and help them to take another step in their language level growth. A third question you might ask, what does she do on weekends? And the student could look around. Let's see, Saturday and Sunday, there's no weekend here, so they would have to understand what a weekend means. So here, Saturday, Sunday, weekend. Teacher, she played tennis. Now, maybe they answer in that way, so you have the opportunity to help them understand the singular and plural forms of the verbs, right? She plays tennis, or the base form of the verb. So this is an opportunity. Also, you can ask pictures of comprehension questions based on the picture. Maybe you can simply ask, what is she doing here? it would require the student to understand the action or the activity. Your call, but the idea is to check their comprehension. Now let's move on. If they've done well with the identification, they're doing all right with the comprehension, and time is going by, this is actually your lesson. Especially if it's a conversation class. Now you're ready to get into what is called the application questions, the creative question application type questions. Now these are the ones that are related to the student's real life or to real life. Okay, so we're no longer talking about Wendy, and we're not asking comprehension questions to check understanding. Now we're asking them to express themselves. How can we relate this lesson to them? And that's what we're doing. And so, question comes out, do you like sports? And so the student will answer that, and you can join them in a conversation. And you can give them feedback as they're giving their responses. Take note mentally or on paper. You can take note of their responses. And then you can give them feedback after they answer or after the application time. Okay? But the idea is to get them to express themselves. You want them to learn in a communicative way. You could also ask them, what do you like to do on weekends? Because you've already established a kind of pattern in your questions, especially in the comprehension questions. They learned about, maybe you had a little opportunity to talk about present simple as relating to general truths or habits or things that regularly occur. So you could use that question to get them, or designed to get them, to express this new vocabulary form, or maybe to recover them from a lapse. And so they could say, oh, I play soccer, or I play baseball. And so you have a chance to let them, allow them to use what they're learning from the text in real life. And so this is the idea behind creative questions. Now sometimes what teachers do, they go straight to the heart. They read the text with the learner, and then the learners, they ask them, boom, straight to the heart. Do you like sports? There's a couple of problems with that I see for both the teacher and the learner. Number one, if they haven't had enough time to warm up, they're not going to know really how to answer this. So their answers will be very limited. Secondly, the teacher is actually really cutting to the chase, and instead of having a full lesson, 40, 50-minute class, you're really cutting it down by going straight to the application questions, and it becomes a very short class. And then after you finish a few questions, you don't know what else to ask, and it becomes a quiet lesson. Or you ask them questions that are no longer related to what you have presented. See, the idea of these creative questions is to keep everything anchored to what the text or the material is that you're using. So you don't have to, as a teacher, you don't have to go off and start talking about food or start talking about gadgets that are not related, because there's no pattern established for the learner. But here with these creative questions, you're actually creating a stepping stone or a series of steps. Step one, kind of get them warmed up. Step two, introduce them to anything new. Check their understanding of the lesson, and then step three, how to make it more relevant or communicative for the learner. I hope all this makes sense, because what I'm going to ask you to do is stop the video, look at this material right here, and I'm going to ask you to think of at least one identification question, one comprehension question, and one application question. Kind of challenge yourself. Okay? So stop the video, create some questions, and let's see what maybe you came up with. Okay, how did it go? How'd you do? I'm only going to give you some examples, but here, let's start with this, the identification question. Maybe you could say, where does the fisherman live? That's identification. The answer is right there, hut. Maybe they don't know what a hut is, but the nice thing is you have a picture. A comprehension question you could ask after you've asked a couple of identification, comprehension. How do you think his wife feels? Or why do you think she is looking like that? Or you could ask, what is she doing? And see how that's related. That's comprehension. They would have to be able to tell you what she's doing. Application, of course, the obvious might be, have you ever been fishing? The student says, yes. Do you like fishing? Have you ever caught a big fish? Tell me about a time when you caught a fish. If the student says they've never been fishing, maybe you can ask them, what if? Would you like to go fishing? Or do you know someone who goes fishing? Or you can start talking a little bit about fish. Have you ever seen a big fish or something? I know that's kind of silly, but the idea is you want to relate this in some way to the learner, make it relevant, and allow them the opportunity to communicate their questions, or communicate or express their mind and feelings. Disregard the question part. Okay, so creative questions. This is going to be, I'm going to assign this to you. Think of 2 identification, think of 2 comprehension, and 2 application questions based on this text right here. Please submit those as part of an assignment, and I'll check them out and get back to you. So that's it, guys. Creative questions. 3 steps to help you have a full lesson with your learner. It provides a progression. It provides a step-by-step process to have an actual goal or a target or a lesson that relates to the text. A lesson that is anchored to the material that you're presenting. And in many cases, in a lot of cases, I would dare to say in every case, the learners will appreciate the fact that this teacher is taking the time to have a methodical lesson, to have a lesson that has some logical progression. It's not just me, the teacher, pulling whatever question comes to my mind out of my head. Okay? So again, you can do these I wouldn't do these in any order, but I mean you can spend more time on identification or comprehension or even application based on the level of the learner, but please don't skip. The idea is to step 1, step 2, step 3. And so I hope this has been helpful for you, and please let me know. Share your comments. I'll be happy to hear from you. Okay, have a great class.